And are you refreshed? Good. Now what?
Hi, it's awesome to be here. So, first, thank you for everything. You changed my life and many others. 2 questions, if that's okay. What are your thoughts on the Hawaiian philosophy of Ho'oponopono, if I'm saying it correctly, meaning where you take 100% responsibility?
Say again.
What is your thoughts on the Hawaiian philosophy of Ho'oponopono, which is essentially taking responsibility for what's going on in the world and your surrounding environment and healing it from within in order for it to heal externally?
Well, we talk about something that is the same as that when we say life and your observation of it causes you to ask. So you could say in that sense that from what you are observing from the world around you, that you are taking responsibility, at least from your perspective, of offering your preference. And then when you find a way of aligning with that, you do help that. So many people know what they don't want and they stay fixated on that, railing against that. So they have in essence done the first part, which is to say they sort of take responsibility for their part of it, but they don't do anything to heal it unless they are able to find thoughts of satisfaction about that subject.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah.
My other question, I was listening to an audio this week where you had mentioned about a woman driving on a bridge in San Francisco bumping into thought forms. She'd driven that bridge previously, totally fine, and then one day she just felt massive terror, and you had asked,
she wanted to know what happened. Why is the bridge scaring her now when it hadn't frightened her before? And we said the big question is, what's happened in your vibration? What's got you feeling vulnerable? What has caused an activation of vulnerability in you? And she knew her neighbor had been burglarized and she'd been focusing on it. And so now she had that active vibration. So then when she went across a bridge where a lot of people often feel fear, she was bumping into those thought vibrations.
And so you mentioned that bumping into thought vibrations.
Yes. Here's the way we would say that today. She tuned to the frequency of that receiving mode. In other words, we've been talking about which receiving mode. Are you receiving from source, or are you receiving from other frightened drivers who are driving across the bridge?
Yeah, and that brought me to think about how often I have been practicing and leading with these teachings in my own life and being very aware and trying not to judge myself when I'm out of the vortex. Good. But I noticed, my question is, why do I have such irrational fears or feelings of loss that like drop in?
Here's the thing. Let's start by not calling them irrational, because there's a vibrational frequency and there's a momentum which makes them valid to a certain extent. Here's why. Every subject is 2 subjects. It's like a long stick with wanted on one end and absence of wanted on the other. Esther remembers driving home from the hospital with her new baby Tracy, and suddenly the traffic was so scary. And the traffic had never felt scary to Esther before, but now she has this new desire for caring of this new precious baby. And so her amplified desire of well-being stirred up where she was actually vibrating in terms of her belief in the well-being of her child. Does that make sense to you? If somebody called you on the telephone and said, hello, you don't know me, I'm just calling to tell you I will never call you again, you would say, thanks for letting me know. But if someone you really cared about said, I'm never going to call you again, you would feel strong negative emotion. So it has to do with how much desire you have going on in relationship to what your current practice of thoughts is.
Because it seems like, and to clarify the one I said irrational, like, let's go camping. No, there's bears. Or let's go swimming. Sharks. Like, it just, and I've not been swarmed by sharks or attacked by bears, and that's a simple.
But you live in a world of news, and they scour the planet for rare incidences of those things, and they bring them to you on a live stream, and they amplify them with music and drama, until they represent a bigger part of your vibration than they deserve. Because it's not the reality that's out there. It's not how many bears that are out there that equals the probability of you meeting up with one in an unfavorable way. It's the welcoming in your vibration of them.
That's why I don't go camping.
We think
Yet.
it's a good idea. If you believe there's a monster in the bushes, stay away from the bushes. But it can be a very limiting life. There are so many places you can't go that you could have pleasure in. Jerry and Esther, early on in their work with us, they went to Buffalo. And while they were in Buffalo, there was a segment on the television about something that was going on at the high school. And they were demonstrating to the high school students how dangerous driving is. And they had brought into the field house, or into the football field, a lot of cars that had been in bad wrecks, that had all kinds of terrible broken glass and broken vehicles. And they were demonstrating to these kids how dangerous driving was. They wanted to get their attention about how dangerous driving was. And then, to enact it further, they assigned several people, several students, who had been killed in accident. And they had to wear the placard, "I'm dead, I was killed in that car." And "I'm dead, I was killed in that car." And then they held funerals for them, and the parents had to write letters. In other words, they wanted to make this reality as real as possible, believing that the children were lackadaisical about it, and they wanted to get their attention about the danger of driving. And as Jerry watched it, he could not believe what he was seeing, and he wanted to talk to us about it. And we said, these well-meaning parents and teachers are perpetuating the very thing that they do not want, because they are activating in very strong ways. They are putting those thought forms from the bridge into the vibration of the children, and making it more likely that they will rendezvous with those manifestations than less likely. Now that sounds harsh, because as parents, you're always wanting to warn your kids about, you want them to think. We want them to think, but we don't want them to be warned, because every warning is a practice of vibration that, if set in place long enough, will actually become a point of attraction.
No, I agree.
Can't get any clearer than that.
Yeah. And I guess part two of that question was not just the quote unquote irrational fears, but thoughts of loss that just drop in.
We want to go back just briefly. There's no such thing as an irrational fear, because what fear is, or any negative emotion, what fear is you in your human personality holding a thought that your inner being doesn't hold. It's not irrational, it's just a vibrational variance. Let's not call it irrational. Let's call it unwanted. Let's call it not a vibrational match to what my inner being knows. Let's call it practicing a vibration that won't serve me. Let's call the fear indication that I'm offering a vibration, and if I keep it up, I'm going to have a belief set in place that's going to attract things I do not want. That's not irrational. Do not make your guidance system irrational. It's rational. It is of the utmost rationality, because it's the wisdom of source in conflict with your thought. And maybe that's what you mean by irrational. My inner being isn't thinking it, so why am I? But you are, because you've practiced it. And you're not going to stop it just because somebody calls it irrational, because momentum has you going there. In other words, beliefs are just thoughts that you continue to think. And the reason that you continue to think them is because law of attraction supports that thought. You can't go cold turkey and just not think about it. You have to replace those thoughts with thoughts that feel better. Let's make a statement of intent here. It is my intention to replace what I've formerly been calling irrational thoughts, which are really rational thoughts, to replace those unpleasant rational thoughts with more pleasant rational thoughts. So I'm going to line up with what's in my vortex, with what I desire, with who my inner being is, with what I desire.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. We'll take some discipline, but I will do it.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing about discipline. Discipline is an effort. Discipline is thinking about what I'm not going to think about. So rather than discipline, we would rather that you choose meditation, which just deactivates that thought. And if you deactivate that thought enough, then the true rational thoughts will dominate. And the true rational thoughts are the thoughts of source. You're good and you're worthy, and good things are supposed to come to you, and you're supposed to feel good, and life is supposed to be good, and life is supposed to be fun. Those are the most rational of thoughts. The irrationality are the thoughts you've picked up along your physical trail when you've been pinching yourself off from the true rational thoughts. Really good.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now what?